Humanity has always been fascinated by beginnings. Who were we before we built cities, crafted tools, or recorded our first stories? Conventional history tells us that civilization began in Sumer, a land of mud brick cities, early writing, and remarkable ingenuity. Yet, when we pause and examine the patterns of knowledge, innovation, and myth, a deeper question emerges. What if Sumer was not the beginning, but a continuation? What if the brilliance we attribute to the first civilization was inherited from a far older, almost invisible culture whose traces are scattered across the world? From the precise alignments of ancient monuments to enigmatic artifacts that defy conventional explanation, the evidence suggests a continuity that stretches beyond recorded history. Tools, carvings, and symbolic objects hint at a depth of knowledge and sophistication that cannot always be explained by isolated invention. Myths of culture bringers, divine teachers, and antediluvian sages appear across distant continents, suggesting a shared memory of wisdom older than Sumer itself. In this exploration, we move between what is known and what remains mysterious. We trace subtle currents of human understanding, from the visible achievements of early civilizations to the faint, hidden footprints of those who came before. We follow artifacts, stories, and celestial patterns, seeking the whispers of knowledge carried forward across generations. This journey is not about proving a definitive truth, but about opening the mind to possibility, about imagining a past where humanity inherited not only the earth but also the wisdom of those who walked before us. It is an invitation to linger in contemplation, to see history not as a linear timeline, but as a layered tapestry, where light and shadow intertwine, and where Sumer may be just one visible blossom of a much older tree of knowledge. In the fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, a remarkable civilization suddenly emerges. Cities rise with astonishing speed, their streets laid out in deliberate grids, temples reaching toward the sky, and canals crisscrossing the land with intricate precision. This is Sumer, often called the cradle of civilization. Yet what we observe here raises profound questions. How did people, who only a few generations before lived as scattered farmers or herders, suddenly possess the knowledge to design urban centers, codify laws, and chart the heavens with such exactitude? The abruptness of their sophistication suggests something more than trial and error. There's a sense of readiness, as if these early Sumerians inherited a toolkit of knowledge already refined by those who came before them. The Sumerians' achievements are staggering in their complexity. They developed cuneiform, one of the first known writing systems, transforming abstract thought into permanent symbols etched onto clay tablets. These early records reveal not only accounts of trade and governance, but also mathematics, astronomy, and literature. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's earliest stories, contains reflections on mortality, the natural world, and the search for wisdom. What is remarkable is that these achievements appear fully formed, without a clear line of gradual development. The written word, city planning, and bureaucratic administration seem to emerge simultaneously, creating a puzzle for historians and archaeologists alike. Consider their understanding of mathematics. The Sumerians used a base 60-number system, which allowed them to calculate fractions, angles, and time divisions with extraordinary precision. Their knowledge of geometry enabled them to construct buildings and canals that could withstand floods and shifts in the earth. Roads were straight, plazas were proportionally measured, and public spaces were designed for both functionality and ceremony. In a world where survival often demanded immediate attention to food, water, and shelter, the foresight and abstraction required for such meticulous planning seem almost inconceivable. It prompts the question, from where did this knowledge come? Was it purely the product of observation and experimentation, or did it have antecedents in an older, perhaps forgotten, tradition? Their understanding of astronomy is equally compelling. Sumerian astronomers meticulously tracked the movements of stars and planets, predicting lunar cycles and eclipses. These observations were not merely for curiosity. They were tied to agriculture, religion, and governance, guiding planting seasons and ritual calendars. The level of accuracy, achieved without telescopes or modern instruments, is extraordinary. It suggests not only keen observation, but also an inherited methodology, a systematic approach to understanding the cosmos that may have been passed down from civilization long erased by time. Even the sudden appearance of legal codes and administrative systems is striking. The Sumerians implemented systems of governance that balanced authority, trade, and social responsibility. Laws were inscribed, contracts were standardized, and trade networks spanned vast distances. For a society at the dawn of urban life, this level of social complexity seems improbable without prior experience or guidance. It is as though the rules, the frameworks, and the basic principles of organized society were already known, waiting to be rediscovered and applied. Architecture offers another puzzle. Temples and ziggurats were not just functional buildings. They were symbolic, designed to connect humans with the divine, to align with the stars, and to embody a cosmic order in stone. The precision of these constructions, particularly given the technology of the time, is remarkable. Stones were quarried, transported, and assembled with an accuracy that still amazes engineers today. And yet, there is little evidence of gradual experimentation leading up to this sophistication. Instead, the monumental structures appear fully realized, as if the Sumerians were following inherited principles of design rather than inventing them from scratch. Trade and cultural exchange further complicate the picture. Sumerians traded with distant regions, acquiring metals, timber, and luxury goods. Their cuneiform tablets record names, commodities, and transactions with a consistency that suggests both experience and an established bureaucratic methodology. It is tempting to imagine that these systems developed over centuries of local experimentation, but the archaeological record offers little to show this slow build. The knowledge appears suddenly, with a level of sophistication that implies a foundation already laid in eras we have yet to fully understand. Contrast becomes a useful lens here. On one hand, we have a civilization that emerges seemingly from nowhere, fully equipped to thrive and innovate. On the other, we know that human ingenuity typically unfolds incrementally, shaped by centuries of trial, error, and adaptation. The suddenness of Sumerian achievement creates tension between what is documented and what remains hidden. It invites us to consider whether our historical timeline might be missing chapters, eras of experimentation, societies lost to flood, fire, or decay, leaving only whispers in myth and scattered artifacts. This notion of inheritance is not purely hypothetical. Myths from the region itself hint at earlier teachers. Stories of the Apkallu, semi-divine sages sent from the heavens to impart wisdom, suggest that the Sumerians themselves felt they were receiving knowledge from an older source. Could these stories be symbolic memories of a civilization whose innovations were absorbed, consciously or unconsciously, into Sumerian culture? Perhaps the suddenness we perceive is not an anomaly of invention, but a reflection of cultural transmission from a predecessor race. A civilization erased by catastrophe, yet leaving seeds of its understanding in the Fertile Crescent. Even in technological innovation, the Sumerians' advances are profound. They developed the wheel, plows, irrigation techniques, and metalworking skills that allowed them to sustain urban populations. The scale of these innovations implies cumulative knowledge, techniques refined, improved, and perfected over time. Yet, once again, the archaeological record reveals little about who might have perfected these methods before Sumer. Are we to assume that each advance arose spontaneously, in parallel, across multiple domains, with remarkable coordination? Or is it more plausible that some of these techniques were inherited, refined from a body of knowledge that predates the cities themselves? The Sumerian example raises a broader question. What if every major innovation we attribute to early civilization is the tip of an iceberg? Perhaps the early cities, writing systems, and legal codes are like the visible surface of a vast, hidden ocean of knowledge, most of which has been lost. The suddenness of their sophistication may not be accidental, but a clue, a fragment of memory from an older race that humanity rediscovered, consciously or not. It is a quiet, persistent mystery that frames Sumer not as the beginning, but as a revival, a rekindling of a fire lit long before our recorded history began. As we move beyond Sumer, these questions will echo across time and space. Other civilizations, appearing suddenly and fully formed, suggest a pattern that cannot be ignored. The suddenness, the sophistication, the inherited knowledge, all invite us to consider that the story of civilization is deeper and more complex than we have ever imagined. Sumer is both a marvel and a puzzle, a shining beacon of early human achievement, and yet a hint that the roots of that achievement may stretch back into a forgotten, mysterious past. In this section, we begin to see the tension between the known and the unknown, between documented achievement and the possibility of inheritance. Sumer, magnificent as it is, may not be the origin story. Instead, it could be the moment when humanity awakened to the gifts left by an older, vanished race. The evidence is fragmentary, but it is compelling, suggesting that the dawn of civilization may have begun long before the first city rose from the fertile plains of Mesopotamia. And so, as we step away from the bustling streets of Ur and Uruk, gazing at their towering ziggurats in the soft light of an imagined sunrise, we are left with wonder. Who came before? What knowledge did they leave behind? And how did it find its way into the hands of a people who, in the blink of geological time, transformed the world forever? These are the questions that will guide our journey deeper into the mysteries of human origins as we explore civilizations across continents, myths that span millennia, and ruins that whisper of wisdom long lost, but not entirely forgotten. As we leave the bustling cities of Sumer behind, we are drawn to a broader question. How did other early civilizations arise across the world with a similar air of sudden sophistication? The ancient landscapes of Egypt, the Indus Valley, early China, and even the Americas present a startling pattern. Each appears to blossom almost fully formed, with cities, complex social structures, and advanced technologies emerging seemingly without the long, gradual buildup that one might expect. The contrast between what is known and what remains mysterious becomes more striking as we examine these cultures. It is as though a silent hand guided human progress in several distant corners of the world, whispering patterns of knowledge that only later became visible in stone, clay, and codified law. In Egypt, for example, the rise of the Nile civilization seems sudden yet precise. The monumental pyramids of Giza, constructed with staggering accuracy, appear relatively soon after the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. The planning, engineering, and alignment of these structures with celestial bodies reflect knowledge that would take centuries to perfect, even under ideal conditions. Hieroglyphs, much like Sumerian cuneiform, appear with remarkable completeness. They were not crude or embryonic. They were functional, artistic, and precise, capable of recording complex ideas about religion, law, and governance. The suddenness of these accomplishments raises questions. Could such advanced understanding have emerged independently in multiple areas at once, or might there have been a transfer of knowledge across vast expanses of time and space? Across the Indus Valley, cities such as Mohenjo-daro and Harappa showcase urban planning that rivals or even surpasses Sumerian examples in its sophistication. Streets were laid out in perfect grids, drainage systems allowed for efficient water management, and standardized bricks point to a system of regulation and quality control. Unlike Sumer, much of the Indus script remains undeciphered, yet its existence implies a level of literacy and administration that demands explanation. The civilization flourished with remarkable uniformity across hundreds of kilometers, suggesting a shared blueprint or inherited knowledge rather than isolated trial and error. And yet, prior to these cities, evidence of incremental societal development is sparse. Once again, The abrupt emergence of complex organization points toward the tantalizing possibility of deeper, older sources of knowledge. Turning to early China, the Yellow River civilizations offer similar puzzles. Neolithic sites reveal remarkable advances in pottery, metallurgy, and settlement planning. By the time dynastic states appear, these achievements are highly developed, as if built upon long-forgotten foundations. The tools, techniques, and societal organization seem to arrive suddenly, leaving a gap between the imagined gradual evolution of culture and the archaeological reality. Across continents, we notice patterns that cannot be ignored. Sudden urban sophistication, advanced technology, and centralized governance arising in geographically distant regions. The question persists: are these coincidences independent human brilliance, or remnants of knowledge passed down from an earlier civilization? Even in the Americas, civilizations such as the Olmec, Maya, and Carol challenge conventional expectations. The Olmec, sometimes called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, produced colossal stone heads, ceremonial centers, and artistic motifs that would resonate across future societies. Carol, in present-day Peru, reveals urban organization and monumental architecture predating other known civilizations by millennia. Across the Americas, we find precise astronomical observation, mathematical systems, and urban planning. These achievements appear without a clear antecedent, just as Sumer and Egypt emerged without obvious precursors. Patterns of knowledge seem to surface independently, yet the similarities in technological sophistication, symbolic motifs, and urban planning provoke questions about their origins. The puzzle grows when we examine these civilizations in parallel. Across continents, early societies demonstrate comparable advances in writing, astronomy, urban planning, and governance. Certain symbolic motifs, serpents, cosmic trees, winged beings, appear in distant cultures, separated by thousands of miles and centuries, hinting at a shared or inherited cultural memory. The repetition of architectural principles, such as pyramidal structures and alignment with celestial bodies, suggests not mere coincidence, but a common framework of understanding. These echoes raise the possibility that humanity may not have started each civilization from scratch. Instead, we may have inherited fragments of knowledge from an older, forgotten source, carefully encoded in myth, practice, and construction. Myths reinforce this sense of continuity. The Mesopotamian Apkallu, Egypt's Shem-Sahor, the Viracochas of the Andes, and ancestral teachers in Polynesian and Aboriginal stories all hint at beings who taught humans essential knowledge. Whether these myths describe literal historical figures, symbolic archetypes, or cultural memories of an earlier civilization, they suggest that early humans may have felt themselves recipients of inherited wisdom. Could it be that the first cities, scripts, and monumental structures were not entirely invented, but were rediscoveries, inspired by memories of a past civilization whose traces have been preserved only in fragmented form? The global recurrence of similar myths adds weight to this possibility. The notion of inherited knowledge also finds subtle support in the artifacts themselves. Early metallurgy, the wheel, irrigation techniques, and complex stone construction appear suddenly across multiple regions. Innovations that should have taken centuries to develop in isolation seem to emerge almost simultaneously in different corners of the world. This pattern suggests more than mere coincidence. It hints at the possibility of human societies tapping into a collective inheritance, a pool of knowledge passed down through memory, tradition, or perhaps even a long-lost civilization whose influence subtly shaped multiple lineages. Yet, the evidence is enigmatic. Archaeologists and historians often debate the origins of these achievements, proposing trade networks, independent invention, or the convergence of human ingenuity as explanations. Each theory has merit, yet none fully resolves the tension between the known and the unexplained. The contrast between the suddenness of these civilizations and the gradual timeline suggested by conventional evolutionary narratives remains stark. The more we examine the archaeological record, the more it seems that gaps in our understanding are not mere absences but openings into deeper mysteries. It is in these gaps that imagination and inquiry meet. By observing patterns across continents, we begin to see humanity not as a series of isolated sparks, but as participants in a vast, interconnected process of cultural inheritance. Early civilizations may have been rekindling a knowledge long forgotten, guided by fragments of insight preserved in myth, ritual, and architecture. The apparent simultaneity of urban sophistication, writing, and scientific observation across distant regions is not merely a curiosity. It is a signal that human development may be layered, with earlier, invisible chapters shaping what we perceive as beginnings. This exploration naturally leads us to consider the idea of memory itself. Human culture does not exist in a vacuum. Knowledge can endure catastrophes, migrations, and millennia of change if it is encoded in stories, symbols, and structures. Just as the Sumerians may have inherited wisdom from a lost predecessor, other early civilizations could have drawn upon fragments of knowledge from an even older network, dispersed across continents and centuries. What we call invention might in fact be rediscovery, and what appears as isolated genius might be the echo of wisdom passed down from civilization we have yet to fully recognize. In examining these civilizations together, we notice a pattern of emergence, sophistication, and symbolic continuity that transcends geography. The sudden rise of cities, the precision of architecture, the depth of astronomical understanding, and the recurrence of mythic motifs suggest that the story of civilization is not a series of isolated beginnings, but a complex web of inherited knowledge and rediscovered wisdom. Each culture, while unique, participates in a shared human endeavor, a chain of learning and innovation stretching far beyond recorded history. As we step back and observe the broader picture, the question becomes unavoidable. Could humanity's early civilizations, despite appearing disparate and independent, all be tapping into remnants of a much older, global source of knowledge? Could the cities of Sumer, the pyramids of Egypt, the urban centers of the Indus Valley, and the monumental architecture of the Americas all be chapters in a story that began long before we imagined? The evidence is fragmentary, yet patterns persist across time and space, encouraging us to look beyond conventional timelines and to entertain the possibility of inheritance rather than pure invention. And so, as we move from continent to continent, from river valley to river valley, we encounter a remarkable convergence. The suddenness, sophistication, and similarity of early civilizations hint at a shared history hidden beneath layers of time. The story that unfolds is not merely one of individual ingenuity, but of continuity, of knowledge passed down, sometimes remembered, sometimes forgotten, yet always leaving traces for those willing to observe closely. It is a story that challenges assumptions, invites wonder, and gently reminds us that human history may be far deeper, far richer, and far more mysterious than any single civilization can reveal on its own. Long before the first cities rose in Sumer, before written records chronicled kings and priests, humanity existed in a world that is largely invisible to us today. Archaeology gives us glimpses of these early societies, yet there are gaps, periods where knowledge seems to appear abruptly, almost fully formed, without the expected precursors. It is in these gaps that the question arises: could early humans have inherited knowledge from a civilization that existed long before recorded history? If so, what might that world have looked like, and how did its wisdom survive to shape the first recognizable civilizations? Across continents, myths speak of teachers, guides, and mysterious beings who bestowed knowledge upon humanity. In Mesopotamia, the Apkallu are described as semi-divine sages who taught writing, agriculture, and the principles of order. In Egypt, the Shem-Sahor are said to have passed on essential cultural knowledge, laying the foundations for governance and ritual. Similar stories appear in the Americas, with the Viracoches and other culture bringers instructing humans in skills and principles necessary for civilization. Even in the Pacific and Australia, ancestral beings are credited with guiding early humans, embedding wisdom into society through stories, rituals, and law. These legends, persistent across time and geography, hint at a memory of knowledge inherited rather than invented. They suggest that human achievement did not emerge entirely spontaneously, but may have been shaped by guidance, observation, and the preservation of wisdom from a civilization lost to time. Whether symbolic or literal, these myths point to a hidden lineage of knowledge, laying the groundwork for the first cities, the first writing, and the first monuments. In this sense, history becomes less a story of sudden invention and more a story of continuity, inheritance, and rediscovery, a thread connecting humanity to a mysterious and largely forgotten past. Across the globe, ancient ruins challenge our understanding of early human civilization. Sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, with its massive stone pillars and intricate carvings, predate agriculture yet reveal extraordinary planning and symbolic knowledge. How could hunter-gatherers construct such monumental architecture without prior urban experience? Similarly, Gunung Padang in Indonesia presents terraces and stone arrangements that may be tens of thousands of years old, suggesting sophisticated engineering and spatial awareness far beyond what conventional timelines allow. In the Americas, Carroll in Peru displays pyramids, plazas, and urban planning that emerged thousands of years before civilizations like the Maya or Aztec, hinting at a continuity of knowledge that transcended regions. Even in Europe, megalithic structures such as Stonehenge or the dolmens of Brittany exhibit precise alignments with celestial events, demonstrating an understanding of astronomy and geometry. Submerged structures off coastlines suggest that entire settlements may have been lost to rising seas, leaving only fragments for future generations to interpret. These sites, scattered across continents and separated by vast distances, share common themes: planning, symbolic representation, and alignment with natural or celestial cycles. They suggest that early civilizations inherited knowledge, principles of architecture, astronomy, and organization from predecessors whose achievements have mostly vanished. The sophistication observed is not isolated invention, but the continuation of ideas preserved in stone, ritual, and memory. By studying these ancient ruins, we catch glimpses of a world before recorded history, a world whose wisdom survived cataclysm and time, ready to guide the first recognized civilizations in their remarkable leaps toward urban life and culture. As we examine the scattered ruins, terraces, and pillars of an ancient world, a persistent question arises. Why do these civilizations appear so suddenly, only for much of their knowledge to vanish? The answer may lie in cataclysms, natural and environmental upheavals that reshaped landscapes, erased settlements, and disrupted the continuity of culture. The Earth itself has a long memory of catastrophic events, from massive floods and earthquakes to volcanic eruptions and ice ages. Each of these episodes could have destroyed the physical records of earlier civilizations, leaving only fragments of their knowledge to be rediscovered by those who came after. It is in these periods of upheaval that the notion of inherited wisdom gains particular resonance, suggesting that what we see as sudden sophistication may actually be a rekindling of lost understanding. Consider the end of the last ice age, roughly 12,000 years ago. Global temperatures shifted dramatically, ice sheets melted, and sea levels rose by tens of meters. Entire coastlines were submerged, and regions that may have supported complex societies disappeared beneath the oceans. Archaeological evidence hints at the existence of settlements now underwater, potentially preserving traces of civilizations far older than the earliest recorded cities. Göbekli Tepe, Gunung Padang, and Carroll may have survived precisely because they were inland, spared from the worst of rising waters. But countless other sites, built along now submerged coastlines, may remain hidden beneath the waves, their knowledge lost to the shifting tides. The scale of this transformation suggests that humanity could have inherited knowledge that survived only in fragmentary form, passed down through memory, myth, and ritual rather than continuous documentation. Flood myths from cultures around the world may encode collective memories of these cataclysms. The Mesopotamian story of Utnapishtim, preserved in the Epic of Gilgamesh, recounts a deluge that wiped out much of humanity, leaving a single survivor to carry knowledge forward. Similarly, the biblical story of Noah, the Hindu tale of Manu, and flood legends among the Maya, the Inca, and indigenous Australians all point to catastrophic events that reshaped the earth. While these myths are often interpreted symbolically or allegorically, their global consistency suggests that they may preserve memories of real environmental upheavals. Could these disasters have erased the traces of earlier civilizations, leaving only a faint imprint on human consciousness that later generations would rediscover in myth and architecture? Volcanic eruptions also serve as reminders of the fragility of human settlements. The eruption of Thera, Santorini, in the 2nd millennium BC devastated nearby Minoan civilization, yet it is conceivable that similar, earlier eruptions wiped out other, even older societies. Massive explosions would have buried cities in ash, poisoned soils, and disrupted trade networks and communication. In such scenarios, much of accumulated knowledge could have been lost, preserved only in oral traditions, symbolic art, or scattered artifacts. Civilizations that appear to emerge suddenly might therefore be rebuilding upon remnants of a destroyed culture, inheriting principles that survive catastrophe in fragmentary form. Earthquakes, tsunamis, and shifting tectonic plates add another dimension to the story. Entire regions of human habitation could vanish in moments, leaving few traces for archaeologists to find. Coastal settlements, river-valley cities, and even inland centers built on fault lines would have been vulnerable to sudden destruction. The repetition of certain architectural patterns, urban layouts, and symbolic motifs across disparate regions may reflect knowledge that was transmitted and preserved precisely because the original societies were disrupted. Inheritance, in this sense, becomes not just metaphorical. It becomes a survival strategy, a way for civilizations to reconstruct themselves using pieces of a fragmented, older world. Climatic shifts further compound the picture. Prolonged droughts, sudden cooling events, and the destabilization of agricultural systems would have forced populations to migrate, adapt, or perish. Civilizations dependent on fertile river valleys or predictable monsoons may have been abandoned, their inhabitants dispersing into new regions, carrying knowledge of construction, governance, and ritual with them. This pattern of destruction and migration could explain the sudden appearance of sophisticated societies in multiple regions after millennia of silence. The knowledge we associate with Sumer, Egypt, or the Indus Valley may not have originated in those places, but instead represents the culmination of understanding preserved through millennia of upheaval and reconstruction. Even the faint remnants we find today, stone terraces, monumental architecture, megalithic circles, and submerged platforms, speak to resilience. They endured floods, earthquakes, volcanic ash, and shifting coastlines. The persistence of these structures suggests that human knowledge, once discovered, is not easily erased, even by catastrophic events. It also reinforces the notion that early civilizations may have inherited more than material skills. They inherited strategies for survival, systems of organization, and principles of symbolic thought. The sudden sophistication observed in multiple regions may therefore be the product of both human ingenuity and the careful transmission of memory across generations, guided by necessity and preserved through adaptation. Archaeological anomalies further support this possibility. Sites like Göbekli Tepe, predating agriculture, suggest that social organization and symbolic communication existed far earlier than mainstream narratives allow. Gunung Padang, Carol, and submerged structures hint at societies sophisticated enough to create enduring monuments despite environmental instability. The abrupt emergence of writing, astronomy, and governance in the earliest recorded civilizations mirrors these patterns, suggesting that the knowledge we attribute to these societies may be inherited fragments from older, vanished civilizations. The past is not linear. It is punctuated by cycles of creation, destruction, and rediscovery, each catastrophe leaving gaps that later generations attempt to fill. The idea of cataclysms reshaping civilization also reframes our understanding of myths, rituals, and symbolic art. Stories of floods, divine retribution, or cosmic upheaval may be more than allegorical. They may encode historical memory. Sacred structures aligned with the stars, monumental terraces, and precise stonework may preserve, in physical form, lessons learned from predecessors who survived disasters. In this context, inherited knowledge becomes both practical and spiritual. It is a guide to rebuilding, a template for urban planning, agriculture, ritual, and governance, and a reminder of humanity's fragility in the face of natural forces. Ultimately, the pattern of abrupt sophistication, interrupted by disappearance and rediscovery, challenges the linear timeline of civilization. It suggests that what we perceive as beginnings, the first cities, the first writing, the first monuments, may be merely the surface of a far deeper history. Humanity may have walked paths created by an earlier civilization, surviving through myth, ritual, and physical evidence that endured cataclysmic events. Inheritance, both of practical knowledge and symbolic wisdom, becomes a key to understanding the sudden emergence of advanced societies. As we contemplate these cycles of destruction and renewal, the landscape of the ancient world takes on a new meaning. Ruins are no longer simply remnants of the first civilizations. They are echoes of a deeper past, fragments of knowledge preserved against the relentless forces of nature. The sudden sophistication of early urban centers, the precise alignment of temples and pyramids, and a recurrence of symbolic motifs across continents all hint at a hidden lineage of wisdom, one that survived floods, eruptions, earthquakes, and ice ages to guide humanity once more. In the quiet reflection prompted by these cataclysms, we begin to see history not as a straightforward progression, but as a series of cycles: creation, loss, survival, and rediscovery. The earliest civilizations we know may not be true beginnings. They may be awakenings, rekindling the knowledge of civilizations that existed long before. And it is in the patterns left by destruction and the fragments that survive that we catch glimpses of a human story far older, far richer, and far more mysterious than conventional timelines allow. As we consider the cycles of destruction and renewal across prehistory, one of the most intriguing questions emerges. How did knowledge survive the cataclysms, the floods, the shifting tectonic plates, and the vanishing civilizations? The answer lies in the subtle, enduring ways that humans preserve understanding, through symbols, structures, ritual, and story. Across continents and millennia, the earliest peoples found ways to encode their wisdom in physical forms, ensuring that even if a city was lost, a flood came, or a culture disappeared, fragments of understanding would endure. These traces are not always obvious. They are woven into architecture, aligned with the stars, etched into stone, and hidden in myth, forming a silent web that connects humanity to its forgotten past. Monuments themselves often functioned as repositories of knowledge. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the pyramids of Egypt, the terraces of Cairo, and the stone circles of Europe were more than ceremonial or political statements. They were expressions of mathematics, astronomy, and social organization. The act of construction encoded principles that could be rediscovered, understood, and applied by later generations. The alignment of structures with celestial events, the proportional dimensions of temples, and the careful placement of streets and plazas suggest an understanding of geometry, observation, and planning that transcended the immediate needs of a given population. Knowledge, in these contexts, was built into the very stones, designed to survive centuries of environmental change and societal upheaval. Symbols serve a similar purpose. Across regions, recurring motifs hint at a shared human memory of the principles of creation, order, and cosmic understanding. Serpents, wings, trees, and geometric patterns appear in Sumerian carvings, Egyptian reliefs, Mesoamerican temples, and megalithic European monuments. These images are more than decoration. They're symbolic repositories of knowledge. They encode cosmological principles, spiritual understanding, and social order, offering subsequent generations a guide to reconstruct ideas that might otherwise have been lost. In essence, symbols became a mnemonic device, a way to store complex concepts in a form that could endure across generations and even across disasters. Writing and proto-writing are equally important in this transmission. Cuneiform tablets, Egyptian hieroglyphs, Indus Valley inscriptions, and Mesoamerican glyphs preserve records not only of trade and governance, but also of myth, astronomy, and ritual. Even when the language itself fades from understanding, the structure, repetition, and patterns provide clues to the underlying logic and principles that guided earlier societies. Written forms, combined with symbolic and architectural encoding, create a multidimensional network of knowledge, ensuring that essential wisdom survives even in fragmentary or partially understood forms. Ritual also plays a critical role. Ceremonies, seasonal festivals, and initiations often mirrored the cycles of the cosmos, agricultural rhythms, or social hierarchies. By participating in these rituals, successive generations internalized knowledge of the natural world, societal organization, and the symbolic universe. Rituals thus served as a living memory, preserving essential skills and understanding in embodied form. Even when disasters destroyed cities and libraries, the rhythm of these practices continued, subtly transmitting knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. Architecture and urban planning also functioned as teaching tools. Streets aligned to the cardinal directions, temples oriented towards solstices, and urban grids designed for efficiency and ritual activity were not just practical. They were educational. They taught principles of geometry, astronomy, and governance simply by being inhabited and used. Residents and visitors would learn through interaction with the environment, absorbing patterns and principles embedded in the built world. In this way, knowledge was self-perpetuating, encoded in the physical landscape itself, waiting to be interpreted and applied by later civilizations. The consistency of these preservation methods across distant civilizations is remarkable. In Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, China, the Andes, and Europe, we find similar strategies. Monumental architecture, aligned with the stars, embedded with symbolic meaning, and reinforced through ritual and oral tradition. The repetition of these methods suggests a universal understanding of how to preserve knowledge against the forces of time and catastrophe. It is as if early humans, or their predecessors, recognized that while societies could perish, knowledge, if encoded in durable forms, could survive for millennia, ready to guide the civilizations that came after. Even myths themselves serve as enduring vessels for wisdom. Stories of culture bringers, floods, celestial events, and cosmic order often encode practical knowledge, as well as moral and spiritual guidance. Myths compress time, encoding the principles of agriculture, astronomy, law, and social order into narrative form. They offer a form of continuity, allowing knowledge to persist even when the material culture of a civilization has been destroyed. The legends of the Apkallu, the Shemsahor, the Viracochas, and other culture bringers are not mere fiction. They are vessels of memory, connecting humanity to a past that remains partially hidden yet persistently influential. Even subtle artifacts, such as carvings, stone tools, or geometric markings, function as repositories of knowledge. They preserve understanding of materials, techniques, and abstract concepts. The precision of stone cutting, the repetition of geometric motifs, and the alignment of artifacts with astronomical phenomena all suggest a sophisticated method of encoding knowledge. These objects, when interpreted carefully, reveal patterns of thought, observation, and experimentation that could be passed from one generation to the next, ensuring that knowledge was not entirely lost despite the fragility of human societies. In examining these methods of preservation, a clear pattern emerges. Knowledge was never stored in a single form. It was distributed across multiple layers of human experience: architecture, ritual, story, symbol, and artifact. This redundancy increased the likelihood that wisdom would survive catastrophes, cultural shifts, and the erosion of time. The result is that the abrupt appearance of sophisticated civilizations may not be a sign of sudden invention, but a reflection of knowledge carefully preserved and transmitted through a combination of practical, symbolic, and narrative means. The implications of this perspective are profound. If early civilizations inherited knowledge encoded in architecture, symbols, ritual, and myth, then the sudden sophistication observed in places like Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and the Americas becomes less mysterious. We begin to see continuity where we previously saw discontinuity. The seemingly abrupt emergence of cities, writing, and astronomy may be the moment when humanity rediscovered or reapplied wisdom that had survived cataclysm, migration, and time. In other words, the first civilizations we recognize may be the inheritors of knowledge far older than any written record can fully attest. This understanding also frames the human story in a new light. Civilization is not only the product of invention, but also of preservation and transmission. Knowledge, once discovered, can persist even in the absence of a continuous cultural lineage. Through symbols, structures, and stories, humanity has developed methods to safeguard understanding, ensuring that even forgotten civilizations leave a legacy that can be rediscovered, interpreted, and applied by subsequent generations. In this sense, history is less a linear progression and more a network of inheritance, where wisdom passes like a quiet current beneath the surface of recorded events. As we reflect on the enduring presence of these methods, the landscape of early civilization takes on new depth. Stone circles, ziggurats, pyramids, terraces, and temples are not only monuments to human achievement, they are repositories of memory, deliberate attempts to ensure that knowledge endures. Symbols and myths, rituals and artifacts serve as threads linking the civilizations we recognize to a deeper, hidden past. Through these threads, humanity maintains a connection to wisdom that predates the earliest cities, guiding the course of societies in subtle yet profound ways. In understanding these systems of preservation, we gain insight into the resilience of human knowledge. Civilization may rise and fall, cities may vanish, and records may be lost, yet knowledge persists if encoded thoughtfully. The abrupt sophistication of early societies, the recurrence of symbolic motifs, and the alignment of structures with cosmic events all point to a lineage of wisdom that transcends individual civilizations. What we see in Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and the Americas may thus represent not the birth of knowledge, but its careful preservation and transmission through the turbulent currents of history. As we reflect on the ways knowledge was preserved through symbols, ritual, and architecture, another layer of mystery emerges. Could ancient civilizations have possessed knowledge far beyond what is usually attributed to them? The sudden sophistication of cities, precise astronomical observation, advanced engineering, and remarkable artistry suggest that the wisdom passed down from earlier civilizations may have included not only practical skills, but insights that modern scholars struggle to fully comprehend. Across continents, evidence hints at techniques and understanding that seem to surpass the technological expectations of their time, raising profound questions about the scope of knowledge that humanity inherited from a forgotten past. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerians developed writing, mathematics, and astronomy with a precision that laid the foundations for all subsequent civilizations. Their ability to chart the stars, predict lunar and solar cycles, and organize complex trade and agricultural systems suggests a level of understanding that would have required generations of cumulative knowledge. Yet, when viewed alongside older sites like Göbekli Tepe, the sophistication of Sumerian systems appears less like an invention and more like the rediscovery of principles already known, carefully encoded in ritual, symbol, and structure. It is as if Sumerians were reconnecting with a body of knowledge that had existed long before their own time, inheriting techniques and concepts that had been preserved across millennia. The pyramids of Egypt offer another compelling example. Their alignment with the cardinal points, precise geometric proportions, and internal structural complexity continue to awe modern engineers. The Great Pyramid of Giza, constructed with millions of limestone blocks, demonstrates mastery over logistics, mathematics, and geometry that remains impressive even today. Scholars continue to debate the methods used to move and place such enormous stones, yet the principles embedded in the pyramid suggest that knowledge of large-scale construction, leverage, and precise measurement was already well established. Could this knowledge have been inherited from earlier civilizations, preserved through oral tradition, ritual, and observation, then applied with remarkable skill to the construction of monumental architecture? The continuity of principles, rather than mere local invention, seems a plausible explanation. In the Americas, sites such as Cairo and Teotihuacan reveal advanced urban planning and understanding of structural engineering long before Europeans arrived. Cairo's pyramids and plazas display precise spatial organization and acoustical design, while Teotihuacan's layout follows a highly organized grid with alignment to celestial phenomena. These achievements suggest that the builders possessed a sophisticated understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and urban design. When considered alongside myths of culture bringers like the Viracochas, the evidence points toward a transfer of knowledge from a prior, perhaps unknown, civilization whose understanding was sophisticated enough to be applied across regions separated by vast distances in time. Stone tools and megalithic structures around the world offer further hints. Some tools demonstrate refinement far beyond what would be expected given the presumed technological capabilities of the societies that produced them. Megalithic constructions, from the stone circles of Britain to the terraces of Gunung Padang, exhibit precise measurements, heavy lifting techniques, and alignment with celestial events that would challenge modern understanding without the aid of contemporary technology. These examples suggest that the knowledge inherited by early civilizations included practical and theoretical insights, enabling them to achieve feats that remain difficult to explain fully. Even metallurgy provides intriguing evidence. Early civilizations developed techniques for smelting, alloying, and shaping metals with skill that appears disproportionate to the available technology of their time. Some bronze and copper artifacts, particularly in Sumer, the Indus Valley, and China, display uniformity and precision that would have required advanced understanding of materials and heat control. The ability to consistently produce high-quality metal objects points to knowledge accumulated and preserved over generations, perhaps inherited from earlier cultures that had already mastered the principles of metallurgy. Such continuity underscores the possibility that certain aspects of civilization, mathematics, astronomy, engineering, and material science, were inherited rather than invented from scratch. Astronomical knowledge further deepens the mystery. Across civilizations, the observation of the skies, the tracking of celestial cycles, and the creation of calendars exhibit striking similarities. The Sumerian calendar, Egyptian star charts, Maya long count calendar, and Chinese observations of planetary movements all reflect sophisticated tracking and prediction of astronomical phenomena. Alignments of pyramids, temples, and megalithic structures to solstices, equinoxes, and star positions demonstrate that this knowledge was embedded not only in text, but in physical structures. The precision and recurrence of these observations across cultures separated by thousands of kilometers suggest that astronomical understanding was part of an inherited framework of knowledge rather than a series of isolated inventions. Mathematics, too, hints at inheritance. Systems of measurement, geometry, and numeracy appear with sudden sophistication in multiple regions. The Sumerians' sexagesimal system, Egyptian geometry, and Indus Valley standardization all indicate that early civilizations possessed a numerical understanding sufficient for architecture, land measurement, and record-keeping. When these mathematical systems appear alongside monuments and artifacts, They suggest a continuity of knowledge that could have been preserved through practical application, observation, and symbolic encoding, passed from one generation to the next. The sudden appearance of these mathematical insights across distant societies strengthens the argument for an inherited intellectual legacy. The interplay of myth, ritual, and practical knowledge suggests that inherited wisdom was both functional and symbolic. Culture bringers, semi-divine figures, and ancestral teachers encoded knowledge in ways that were memorable, enduring, and transferable. Ritual, story, and monument reinforced practical skills and intellectual concepts, creating a multidimensional system for preserving wisdom. This system may have enabled civilizations to reconstruct advanced knowledge after cataclysms, ensuring continuity even when societies were disrupted or destroyed. In this light, ancient wisdom was not static. It was adaptable, encoded in ways that allowed rediscovery and application in new contexts. Even today, the echoes of this inherited knowledge are evident. When modern scholars and engineers study ancient architecture, astronomy, and metallurgy, they often encounter insights that seem surprisingly advanced, suggesting that the intellectual foundations of these achievements may be far older than previously assumed. The precision, foresight, and conceptual depth evident in ancient civilizations hint at a lineage of learning that extends back into prehistory, a reservoir of knowledge preserved through cycles of catastrophe and renewal. As we consider these patterns, the possibility emerges that humanity's first civilizations were not isolated inventors, but inheritors of an intellectual legacy from a forgotten past. The skills and understanding they displayed, construction, astronomy, mathematics, metallurgy, may have been transmitted across generations, preserved in symbols, structures, and stories. The sudden sophistication we observe in the archaeological record may therefore reflect the rediscovery and application of knowledge that had been carefully preserved by earlier cultures, lost in some respects but resilient enough to guide new societies. In contemplating these ideas, we begin to see human history not as a simple narrative of linear invention, but as a complex interplay of inheritance, preservation, rediscovery, and application. Knowledge can survive cataclysm, migrate across continents, and endure in symbols, ritual, and material culture. The achievements of ancient civilizations may thus be less the product of isolated brilliance and more the culmination of a chain of wisdom stretching far deeper into prehistory than conventional timelines suggest. This perspective transforms the way we view human ingenuity. Civilization is not merely the act of inventing new knowledge. It is also the ability to inherit, interpret, and apply the wisdom of the past. Early societies may have been rediscovering principles of construction, astronomy, mathematics, and governance that had already been explored by prior, forgotten cultures. In this sense, inherited knowledge becomes a bridge connecting the past to the present, linking the earliest cities to a lineage of wisdom that extends into the mists of prehistory, awaiting rediscovery by each successive generation. Long before the first cities of Sumer rose from the plains, humans had already begun to trace patterns in the sky. The stars, shifting slowly night after night, became a silent calendar, a guide, and a mystery all at once. In this quiet observation, early humans discovered cycles, lunar, solar, and planetary, that seemed to echo across centuries. The careful counting of days, months, and seasons gave rise to the first notions of time, of rhythm, and of cosmic order. It is here, amid the constancy of the heavens, that we glimpse a profound human curiosity, a desire to measure, predict, and understand that transcends survival itself. Archaeological sites across the world speak softly of this fascination. At Göbekli Tepe, the circular enclosures and carved pillars hint at astronomical alignments, marking solstices and equinoxes. Even older than the first Sumerian records, these structures suggest that humans were already encoding the cosmos into stone. Across continents, similar patterns emerge. The megalithic monuments of Western Europe, the precise layout of the pyramids in Egypt, the celestial symbolism woven into ancient Mesoamerican architecture, all point to a sophisticated understanding of mathematics and the stars. There is a whisper in these arrangements, a quiet suggestion that knowledge might have flowed not only from observation, but from inherited insight, passed through generations in ways we cannot fully reconstruct. Mathematics, too, appears at the heart of this early intelligence. Not merely counting or tallying, but a recognition of ratios, symmetry, and geometric principles that seem almost instinctual. The alignment of stones to cardinal points, the proportions of temples, and the patterns in early artifacts all suggest a mind attuned to order and harmony. One is struck not only by what was achieved, but by the seeming suddenness of these discoveries. Could humans, emerging from simple foraging societies, have developed such precise mathematical intuition entirely independently? Or might these patterns hint at a deeper inheritance, a memory of knowledge reaching back into a forgotten past? The stars themselves became teachers, silently guiding early astronomers. By charting the movements of planets and stars, humans began to build calendars that would inform planting, harvesting, and ritual. Some of the earliest cuneiform tablets in Sumer contain numerical tables and astronomical observations so precise they rival modern calculations. These achievements raise quiet but persistent questions. How did such knowledge appear with such clarity? Were Sumerians merely brilliant innovators, or the inheritors of wisdom carefully preserved through millennia? The interplay between light and shadow, a motif repeated in the cosmos and on Earth, carries symbolic resonance. Solar alignments of megalithic structures cast shifting shadows that mark the passage of time, connecting human experience to the celestial dance above. Mathematics and astronomy were not abstract pursuits. They were embedded in life, ritual, and survival. In contemplating the delicate precision of these early systems, one cannot help but feel a sense of continuity, as if human minds across generations were quietly conversing with one another through the medium of numbers, angles, and stars. This section of human history, observed through the lens of astronomy and mathematics, blurs the line between ingenuity and inheritance. The discoveries are remarkable, yet they also carry a subtle disquiet. How could societies so young, with no known predecessors, arrive at such sophisticated understanding? The evidence invites us to consider a world in which knowledge is not purely linear, where the lessons of an older, perhaps vanished civilization might ripple forward to shape the emergence of Sumer and other early cultures. As night falls over these ancient sites, the constellations continue their silent orbit, indifferent to human chronology, yet intimately connected to our attempt to understand. Here, beneath the sweep of stars that have guided countless generations, we sense the quiet persistence of knowledge, mathematical, astronomical, and profoundly human. The precision, the patterns, the harmonies, they are both a light and a shadow, a brilliant achievement of early humankind, and a whisper of mysteries still waiting to be understood. In tracing the celestial and numerical intelligence of our ancestors, we begin to see a bridge, a connection between what is known and what remains hidden. This bridge will carry us further into the realms of symbols, artifacts, and ancient echoes, inviting us to follow the threads of knowledge wherever they may lead. By contemplating the cosmos as early humans did, we prepare to step softly into the deeper mysteries of human history, where inherited wisdom may illuminate paths long forgotten. Long before Sumerian scribes pressed the first wedge-shaped marks into clay, humans had begun to communicate in ways that transcended simple speech. Symbols appeared, carvings on stone, impressions in clay, and images painted on cave walls. These were not mere decorations. They were attempts to capture meaning, to convey ideas, to encode knowledge that could survive beyond the fleeting moment of a single human life. Each mark, each glyph, carries a whisper from the past, a faint echo of thought reaching across millennia. In these earliest expressions, we sense an impulse not only to communicate, but to preserve, to encode understanding, and perhaps even to guide those who would follow. Across continents, striking similarities appear. A spiral etched into a rock face in Europe bears a visual resemblance to symbols found in the Americas. Geometric patterns and African petroglyphs echo motifs found in Asia. These parallels, appearing in societies with no known contact, hint at something profound. Either the human mind arrives at certain ideas independently, or there exists a deeper, subtler transmission of knowledge that defies conventional timelines. The narrative here is one of both light and shadow, the light of discovery and human ingenuity, and the shadow of mystery, suggesting hidden links connecting distant peoples and eras. Sumerian cuneiform, often celebrated as the first fully developed writing system, does not emerge in isolation. Its roots may stretch back into earlier symbol systems that survive only faintly, scattered across time and geography. Pictograms, ideograms, and abstract markings all suggest that humans have long sought ways to make the invisible visible, to encode stories, observations, and knowledge in enduring forms. Even the most abstract symbols carry meaning, hinting at astronomical knowledge, agricultural practices, or spiritual beliefs, allowing early humans to transmit their understanding to those who may never see the originator's face. Symbols often carry a duality, a layered complexity that blends function with mystery. A carved motif might mark the cycles of the moon, while simultaneously representing mythic figures, spiritual concepts, or sacred geometry. This dual nature reflects the delicate balance between what is known and what remains hidden, the conscious intention of early humans, and the mysteries we now attempt to interpret. Observing these markings is akin to reading a message in a bottle cast across the ocean of time. Some of the meaning is clear, while other aspects remain tantalizingly elusive, inviting reflection and imagination. The global recurrence of certain motifs suggests more than coincidence. The recurring use of spirals, circles, and intersecting lines across civilizations may point to a shared understanding, an inherited pattern of human cognition, or even knowledge passed down from a forgotten source. In Egypt, the spiral becomes a symbol of eternity. In Europe, it marks the cycles of the seasons. In the Americas, it may encode astronomical or ceremonial information. Though these societies never intersected in known history, their symbolic languages echo one another, as if the human mind carries an archetypal memory, a quiet inheritance of knowledge that transcends geography and time. Language itself, as it develops from these symbols, becomes a bridge across generations. Early scripts did more than record transactions or laws. They encoded cosmology, philosophy, and mathematics. Symbols were the scaffolding of thought, a means to structure understanding in a way that could endure centuries. In the inscriptions of Sumer, Egypt, and the Indus Valley, one sees an intentional effort to capture more than words. Patterns of thought, conceptual frameworks, and sophisticated abstractions emerge, suggesting a depth of knowledge that is both practical and esoteric. Here, the line between fact and mystery blurs, as even functional communication carries hints of wisdom inherited from earlier, unknown sources. Some symbols even challenge our assumptions about human development. The use of standardized shapes, proportional geometry, and recurring motifs in widely separated cultures hints at cognitive abilities that appear surprisingly uniform, as though guided by a subtle, unseen hand. Could these patterns be the result of isolated invention, convergent thinking across human societies? Or do they represent a deeper continuity, a reservoir of knowledge inherited from civilizations whose stories were erased by time, yet whose intellectual imprint lingers in the shapes and forms that survived? The calm, reflective tone of this inquiry invites viewers to consider both possibilities, fostering curiosity rather than demanding answers. Symbols, like music or mathematics, are a language without spoken words, a means of communicating across time. They serve as both evidence and enigma, proof of human ingenuity, yet suggestive of something older, something inherited. By tracing these visual threads, we begin to perceive a network of knowledge stretching across continents and centuries, connecting early humans in ways that defy conventional history. The recurring motifs, the careful alignment of forms, and the subtle encoding of complex ideas hint at a continuity that transcends the linear timelines we usually rely upon. This understanding prepares the mind for the next layer of inquiry, the mysterious artifacts, tools, and relics that seem to hold secrets beyond their apparent function. If symbols encode inherited knowledge, then perhaps certain objects, crafted with precision and sophistication, represent physical manifestations of the same invisible intelligence. In observing both, we see a continuum, the abstract and the tangible, the conceptual and the material, all pointing toward the quiet persistence of human understanding across ages. As night falls over ancient sites, we sense the enduring presence of these symbols, like faint constellations etched into the earth rather than the sky. They are reminders that knowledge is rarely entirely lost. It persists in forms that invite careful observation and contemplative reflection. The repetition of shapes, the alignment of symbols, and the integration of meaning across culture and time all suggest that the story of human understanding is more intricate, subtle, and ancient than we often realize. Symbols are not merely decoration. They're the language of memory, the echoes of minds long gone, and the threads that may connect us to civilizations we have yet to fully comprehend. In contemplating these echoes, we move naturally toward a consideration of physical evidence. The artifacts themselves, objects whose precision and mystery deepen the story of inheritance, bridging the abstract world of symbols with the tangible world of human creativity. Through this transition, the narrative flows from contemplation of visual language to the tangible anomalies that challenge conventional timelines, drawing viewers further into a calm, reflective exploration of human history and its hidden mysteries. In the quiet, dust-laden corners of museums and the sun-bleached deserts of ancient ruins, there lie objects that seem almost to defy time itself. Tools carved with precision far exceeding the presumed capabilities of their makers. Stones shaped to exacting proportions without the use of metal, and artifacts whose purpose remains a matter of speculation. All of these challenge the neat, linear narrative of human history. They speak in silence, offering clues that are tantalizingly specific yet maddeningly incomplete. Each artifact becomes a whisper from the past, urging us to reconsider what we think we know about the origins of human civilization. Consider, for example, the metalwork found in layers of sediment predating known metallurgical knowledge. Ancient miners and smiths, equipped with only rudimentary tools, seem to have created alloys and objects that modern metallurgists can scarcely replicate. These objects are more than mere curiosities. They are markers of intelligence, innovation, and perhaps inheritance. They hint at skills and understanding that may have been passed down, preserved in secret or memory, from an earlier, forgotten civilization. The precision of these artifacts challenges assumptions and invites the mind to wander into realms of possibility that stretch beyond conventional history. Stonework offers equally profound mysteries. Monuments like Puma Punku in South America and the precision-cut blocks of Egypt's pyramids suggest that early humans achieved a level of engineering and geometrical understanding far beyond what we might expect. The stones fit together with such meticulousness that even modern tools struggle to replicate them. Some surfaces are smooth to a mirror-like finish, angles so exact that they defy simple explanations. In these creations, there is both light and shadow, the light of human achievement and the shadow of questions that remain unanswered. How could these civilizations, often described as primitive, accomplish such feats without guidance, instruction, or the benefit of a preceding lineage of technical knowledge? Artifacts of this kind are scattered across the globe. A carved object from Central America bears similarities to relics found in distant regions of the Near East. A tool discovered in one layer of sediment mirrors the shape and function of another found thousands of miles away, separated by centuries. These parallels suggest patterns of knowledge that seem to transcend geography and chronology. Were these isolated coincidences products of convergent invention or echoes of wisdom passed down from a lost civilization? The artifacts themselves provide no clear answers, only a quiet insistence that history may be more intricate than the linear stories we have inherited. Then there are objects that seem almost deliberately enigmatic. Small, carefully shaped stones whose purpose remains speculative, mechanical-looking devices whose functionality is debated, and carvings that hint at astronomical knowledge or abstract principles far ahead of their time. Each artifact carries dual meanings, functioning both as a practical tool and as a message, a coded transmission from the past. When studied in isolation, they may appear mysterious but marginal. When considered as a collective, a pattern begins to emerge, a faint thread of sophistication woven through human history, suggesting continuity, inheritance, and knowledge that survive the erosion of time. The psychological impact of these artifacts is profound. They invite viewers and scholars alike into a state of quiet contemplation, the kind of reflection that blends awe with subtle unease. They remind us that human history is not entirely ours to narrate, that the past contains corners and crevices where our understanding falters. This delicate tension between the known and unknown, between light and shadow, mirrors the natural rhythm of discovery. By acknowledging the anomalies, we open ourselves to the possibility that our ancestors were not merely inventors, but inheritors of wisdom that stretched far beyond their immediate experience. Archaeologists have often approached these anomalies with caution. Scientific rigor demands skepticism, yet even the most conservative interpretations cannot fully erase the questions these objects pose. Some scholars propose that they reflect advanced understanding that emerged independently in isolated pockets of human development. Others suggest the faint possibility of lost civilizations, whose knowledge seeped into subsequent generations in subtle ways. Whatever the explanation, the presence of these artifacts forces us to reconsider timelines, assumptions, and the very nature of human ingenuity. The geographic and temporal distribution of these anomalies adds to the intrigue. Across Asia, Africa, the Americas, and Europe, objects of extraordinary craftsmanship appear in layers of history that predate recorded civilization. Some are buried beneath layers of sediment, preserved for millennia, while others survive in the ruins of forgotten cities. Each piece is a puzzle, a fragment of a narrative that we can only partially reconstruct. Together, they paint a picture of human history that is more intricate and mysterious than textbooks suggest. A story in which knowledge may have leapt forward, sometimes appearing abruptly, sometimes echoing faintly across generations. In contemplating these artifacts, one cannot help but reflect on the nature of human memory and transmission. How is knowledge preserved, especially when societies collapse, cities fall, and written records are lost? Perhaps these objects represent a form of silent pedagogy, a method of transmitting insight across generations without words. They may encode mathematical principles, engineering techniques, or cosmological knowledge, waiting patiently for a mind capable of decoding them. In this way, the artifacts themselves become teachers, offering instruction in subtle, enduring ways, bridging the visible present with an invisible past. There is also a poetic rhythm to these discoveries. They exist in a space between fact and possibility, between reality and conjecture. The anomalies challenge us not to jump to conclusions, but to linger in quiet observation, to allow wonder to settle in the mind as one with the dust on an ancient stone. They invite us to experience history not merely as a timeline of events, but as a landscape rich with hidden valleys, deep shadows, and glimmers of light. Places where knowledge might have traveled unseen, guiding humanity in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. As we stand among these relics, there's a sense of connection, a whisper across time, an invisible dialogue with those who came before. The artifacts, in their precision and mystery, speak to the continuity of human thought, creativity, and curiosity. They suggest that the story of civilization may not be a straight line, but a tapestry, woven from threads that reach back into the mists of forgotten eras. It is a story in which humanity is both inventor and inheritor, guided by knowledge we may never fully reconstruct, but can nonetheless sense in the rhythm of stone, metal, and carved symbols. By examining these objects carefully, we are invited to move beyond skepticism toward contemplation. The anomalies do not demand belief in lost civilizations, but they do demand attention, patience, and reflection. They are signposts pointing to questions too profound to answer quickly, questions that linger like shadows in the corners of human history. In this space of quiet inquiry, the mind begins to accept the possibility that our understanding of origins may be incomplete, that Sumerian brilliance might have roots in knowledge handed down from civilizations older than we can fully imagine. As the sun sets over ancient ruins, the artifacts seem to glow faintly in the imagination, their mystery amplified by the gentle silence of observation. They invite viewers to ponder the invisible threads that connect human generations, to consider the inheritance of knowledge as a subtle, enduring current flowing beneath the surface of recorded history. And as this reflection deepens, we are led naturally to the next phase of inquiry. The idea that entire civilizations, now lost to time, may have left behind not only objects and symbols, but entire frameworks of wisdom that shaped the dawn of Sumer and the birth of human civilization as we know it. Beneath the familiar landscapes of ancient history lies a quieter, more elusive story, a civilization that exists almost entirely in shadow. Its presence is faint, marked only by fragments of knowledge, subtle alignments in architecture, and whispers of myth preserved across millennia. This is the civilization that never wrote its full history, that left no monumental records in stone or clay, yet may have seeded the brilliance we later recognize in Sumer and other early societies. It is a civilization that exists not in textbooks, but in patterns, echoes, and anomalies, challenging the boundaries between what is known and what is imagined. Across continents, signs of this hidden inheritance appear in unexpected forms. Early astronomical observations, seemingly preserved in the alignments of distant monuments, suggest knowledge that predates recorded history. Megalithic structures, petroglyphs, and early mathematical artifacts hint at a shared understanding of the cosmos, a comprehension of time, cycles, and geometry that seems remarkably sophisticated for societies often described as primitive. The consistency of these insights, emerging independently in different regions, raises an intriguing possibility. Perhaps knowledge traveled not just through trade or conquest, but through cultural memory, carried delicately from one generation to the next, and even from one civilization to another, long before Sumer's rise. Legends and myths, when examined closely, often carry traces of this invisible civilization. Stories of antediluvian sages, divine teachers, and culture bringers appear across the globe, from the Apkallu of Mesopotamia to Thoth in Egypt, from the Quetzalcoatl narratives of Mesoamerica to the mysterious beings described in early Chinese and Indian myths. At first glance, these accounts may seem fantastical or symbolic, but viewed through a different lens, they could represent encoded memories of human experience, attempts to preserve knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. Across these diverse cultures, there is a subtle thread connecting humanity to a wisdom that predates recorded history, a bridge between the known and the hidden. Physical evidence adds further intrigue. Buried beneath layers of sediment and geological upheaval are artifacts whose sophistication hints at advanced understanding. Tools, carvings, and constructions defy the conventional timelines of technological development. The precision evident in their creation, whether in metallurgy, stonework, or spatial alignment, suggests not random innovation, but accumulated knowledge, potentially transmitted across generations. Each discovery is like a faint footprint, a marker that someone or something moved before recorded history began, leaving behind traces that still echo in the minds of those who study them. Geology and climate also provide clues to the existence of this forgotten civilization. Ancient flood layers, sudden shifts in environmental conditions, and the remnants of lost cities beneath rising water suggest that parts of human history may have been erased, leaving only fragments for us to discover. Civilizations may have arisen and vanished, their knowledge scattered, preserved only in objects, myths, or the subtle resonance of patterns that survive across the globe. The invisible civilization is, in this sense, like a shadow etched upon the landscape of history, present, influential, but never fully illuminated. The transmission of knowledge, in this context, becomes a delicate and almost miraculous process. Without written records, how does wisdom survive? Perhaps it was encoded in ritual, art, symbols, and early forms of counting. Perhaps architectural alignment, repetitive motifs, or oral traditions preserve concepts across centuries. These methods, subtle and indirect, ensured that even if a civilization disappeared, its knowledge could persist in whispers, influencing societies that followed. In this light, Sumerian civilization may not have arisen in isolation. It may have been the beneficiary of a legacy painstakingly preserved through fragments, traces, and echoes. Archaeologists, historians, and mythologists all provide pieces of this puzzle. While conventional scholarship often treats these anomalies as curiosities, closer reflection suggests a hidden order. A system emerges, one in which patterns of thought, symbolic language, and technical knowledge all bear the imprint of a civilization that has left no clear record. It is a civilization whose influence may be everywhere and nowhere at once, shaping humanity quietly, like a gentle current beneath the surface of recorded history. The evidence invites not certainty, but reflection, a willingness to consider that history may be richer and stranger than we have been taught. The global distribution of these traces is itself remarkable. From the megalithic structures of Europe to the pyramids of Egypt, from the observatories of Central America to the petroglyphs of Africa, there is a subtle resonance. The shapes, patterns, and alignments often appear too consistent to be coincidental. Could a lost civilization have influenced these distant societies, or are these echoes of universal human cognition? The invisible civilization, by existing in shadow, forces us to entertain both possibilities, drawing attention to the subtle bridges between isolation and inheritance, between innovation and memory. In contemplating this hidden civilization, one also confronts the fragility and resilience of human knowledge. So much can be lost, cities swallowed by sands, records erased by fire, traditions disrupted by migration. Yet knowledge finds a way to endure. Symbols carved in stone, encoded myths, and carefully aligned monuments may all serve as vessels, carrying understanding across time. They are reminders that civilization is not merely a chronological progression, but a network of influences, some visible, others hidden, all contributing to the story of human development. Poetically, one might imagine the invisible civilization as a teacher working quietly in the background, shaping the trajectory of human thought without revealing itself fully. Its lessons are subtle, embedded in patterns, symbols, and ideas that only later generations might recognize. The brilliance of Sumer, then, may be less a sudden spark than the flowering of a long-accumulated understanding, the visible manifestation of a deeper, quieter current of knowledge that has flowed through time. It is a humbling perspective, suggesting that human ingenuity is both our own and the echo of minds that came before. As we trace these faint threads, the invisible civilization begins to take form not as a concrete empire or city-state, but as an idea, a presence that shapes the contours of human history. It is a civilization we cannot fully reconstruct, yet whose fingerprints are everywhere, in artifacts, myths, architecture, and the very patterns of human thought. The task is not to solve a puzzle definitively, but to open the mind to the possibility of continuity, inheritance, and unseen guidance. It is an invitation to embrace mystery, to recognize that the story of humanity may stretch far deeper than our records reveal. By following these threads, the mind is gently prepared for the next step, understanding how these echoes of a forgotten civilization may have flowed into Sumer itself, influencing culture, science, and society in ways both subtle and profound. The invisible civilization may remain hidden, but its legacy can be traced, contemplated, and appreciated, a quiet, enduring reminder that history is a landscape rich with shadows, waiting for the attentive observer to notice its hidden shapes. As we trace the faint echoes of an invisible civilization, a natural question emerges. How did these whispers of knowledge ultimately reach the people of Sumer? Sumer, often celebrated as the birthplace of recorded civilization, may not have arisen from a vacuum. The sudden brilliance of its cities, its innovations in writing, law, and astronomy, suggests not only ingenuity, but possibly the culmination of influences long hidden in the shadows of history. In contemplating this, we begin to see a delicate bridge between what is known and what is inherited, between visible human achievement and the subtle currents that shaped it. The flow of knowledge is rarely direct or linear. Ideas, symbols, and techniques can be preserved, modified, and transmitted across generations, often leaving faint traces rather than explicit records. Oral traditions, ritual practices, and symbolic motifs may have carried the essence of this wisdom, preparing Sumerians to receive, adapt, and expand upon it. Even the alignment of cities, the construction of ziggurats, and the structuring of administrative systems can be interpreted as reflections of an inherited framework, a pre-existing understanding encoded in human memory and cultural practice. In this way, the brilliance of Sumer might be seen not as an isolated invention, but as a flowering of long-preserved insight. Archaeological evidence offers subtle clues. Artifacts that predate Sumerian urbanization often bear striking similarities in design, function, and symbolic meaning to objects found within early Sumerian settlements. Tools, mathematical notations, and symbolic carving suggest that techniques and concepts were not spontaneously invented, but adapted from older knowledge. Even linguistic patterns hint at connections that reach back into the murky depths of prehistory, as words, symbols, and concepts appear to evolve, carrying fragments of meaning across time and space. The Sumerians, then, may have been both innovators and inheritors, standing at the intersection of past wisdom and present ingenuity. Consider the development of writing, one of Sumer's most celebrated achievements. Cuneiform did not emerge fully formed overnight. Its evolution reflects a gradual systematization of symbols, some of which may have roots in pre-existing pictograms and ideograms from older cultures. These earlier forms, whether preserved in memory, ritual, or artifact, provided a foundation upon which Sumerian scribes could build, translating inherited abstraction into concrete language. Here, the tension between the known, the physical writing tablets, and the unknown, the source of the symbol's sophistication, creates a compelling narrative of inheritance and continuity. Architecture and urban planning reveal similar patterns. The geometric precision of early Sumerian cities, the alignment of temples with celestial events, and the proportionality of public and private spaces suggest an awareness of mathematical and cosmological principles that may have been inherited rather than spontaneously discovered. These alignments are echoed in distant sites long predating Sumer, hinting at shared frameworks of knowledge. The quiet continuity of these ideas across space and time reinforces the possibility that Sumer's apparent leap into civilization was not entirely unprecedented, but rather the culmination of influences reaching back into a much older, almost invisible lineage of human understanding. Even Sumerian mythology carries traces of this inheritance. The stories of the Apkallu, the 7 sages who brought wisdom from the gods, may reflect the memory of teachers or ancestors who carried knowledge across generations. These narratives are more than allegorical. They serve as symbolic vessels, preserving insights about law, agriculture, astronomy, and social order. Myths, when viewed through this lens, are not merely fanciful stories, but potential threads linking the known world of Sumer with the deeper, hidden currents of human civilization. They suggest that knowledge flowed not just through objects and techniques, but also through the subtle medium of story, encoded in ways that could endure even as civilizations rose and fell. Mathematics and astronomy further illuminate this bridge. Sumerians demonstrated sophisticated calculations and observational systems, mapping the heavens with precision that continues to astonish modern scholars. While these achievements are often credited solely to Sumerian innovation, the patterns echo those observed in much older sites. Megalithic observatories, celestial alignments, and symbolic markers from civilizations long lost. The continuity of these insights across millennia suggests a channel of knowledge, a whisper from the past carried forward to inform the emergence of urban civilization in Mesopotamia. This perspective invites us to see Sumer as part of a broader, deeper narrative where innovation is intertwined with inheritance. Trade, migration, and cultural exchange likely played a role as well. Even in prehistory, human societies were not entirely isolated. Ideas traveled along rivers, deserts, and coastal routes, carried by merchants, pilgrims, and travelers. The movement of goods may have been accompanied by the movement of concepts, tools, techniques, symbols, and rituals, providing an additional avenue through which older wisdom could reach Sumer. In this way, the visible cities and artifacts of Mesopotamia are the culmination not only of local ingenuity, but of centuries of subtle cultural transmission, shaped by interactions both near and far. There is also a philosophical dimension to this inheritance. Knowledge, once discovered or created, has a tendency to ripple outward, shaping societies in ways that are sometimes imperceptible. The Sumerians may have been attuned to patterns that were already encoded in the human collective memory, able to recognize, refine, and expand upon ideas that had persisted in shadow. In this light, Sumer becomes not just a starting point, but a nexus, a point where hidden currents converge, crystallizing into the first coherent urban civilization as history records it. The narrative shifts from a story of sudden invention to a story of continuity, adaptation, and subtle guidance from the past. The interplay between light and shadow, knowledge and mystery, is striking. Sumer stands illuminated in history as the cradle of civilization. Yet beneath this light lies the shadow of what came before. The invisible civilization, the transmitted knowledge, the patterns and echoes that shaped innovation long before anyone wrote a tablet. By considering these dualities, we begin to appreciate history not as a linear path from simplicity to complexity, but as a layered, textured landscape where civilizations rise upon the foundations of forgotten wisdom. As we reflect on the transition from shadow to Sumer, it becomes clear that human history is richer and stranger than conventional timelines suggest. The visible achievements of Sumer, the writing, mathematics, architecture, and governance, may be the tip of a much deeper, largely invisible current. This perspective invites us to view civilization not simply as a series of leaps, but as a continuum where knowledge persists quietly, often unseen, through countless generations, sometimes revealing itself in moments of brilliance. By tracing these threads, we prepare to contemplate humanity's hidden inheritance more fully. The Sumerians, remarkable as they were, may have been stewards of wisdom far older than themselves, carrying forward insights from civilizations that have vanished into the mists of time. The artifacts, symbols, and structures they left behind are not only evidence of innovation, but also signposts pointing toward a deeper history, one where human knowledge is an echo of something larger, subtler, and profoundly enduring. Beneath the familiar narrative of human history lies a quieter, almost imperceptible story, a story of inheritance that stretches beyond written records, beyond the rise and fall of known civilizations. If we follow the subtle threads traced in symbols, artifacts, architecture, and myths, we begin to glimpse a different picture of human development, one in which knowledge is not solely created anew, but transmitted, refined, and preserved across generations, often from civilizations whose names and cities have been lost to time. This hidden inheritance challenges our understanding of origins, suggesting that the brilliance of Sumer, and perhaps other early civilizations, is only the visible culmination of much older currents of understanding flowing beneath the surface of recorded history. The notion of inheritance here is not metaphorical. It encompasses techniques, observations, and concepts that appear repeatedly across distant regions and periods. Ancient astronomy, mathematics, and engineering demonstrate precision that seems unlikely to have been arrived at independently in isolated communities. The alignment of megaliths with solstices, the proportionality of monumental architecture, the recurring use of geometric and symbolic patterns across continents, all point to a continuity of knowledge that cannot easily be dismissed as coincidence. These patterns act like footprints, tracing the passage of insight from an older, invisible civilization into the hands of humans who would later shape the known history of the world. Consider, for instance, the precision of early architectural feats. Temples, ziggurats, and pyramids all share structural similarities that transcend their cultural contexts. While we often celebrate Sumerian architects for their ingenuity, the techniques they employed bear echoes of practices visible in earlier, more obscure constructions, structures whose creators left no written record, yet whose methods were preserved in tools, oral traditions, or symbolic instruction. The stones, aligned with mathematical exactitude, the proportions, the careful orientation toward celestial bodies, all suggest knowledge passed down rather than invented in isolation. Here is a human story shaped not only by creativity, but by continuity, a quiet thread connecting us to the minds of those who came before. Mathematics and astronomy provide another lens through which to view this inheritance. The Sumerians recorded lunar cycles, eclipses, and planetary movements with astonishing accuracy. Yet the principles underlying these calculations, observation of the heavens, recognition of cyclical patterns, and the ability to encode them in abstract symbols, appear in multiple civilizations that predate Sumer. Ancient megalithic observatories, celestial alignments in distant regions, and complex counting systems all hint at knowledge preserved through generations. We may not know the full story, but we can see the footprints of thought extending far beyond the cities of Mesopotamia. Knowledge, it seems, moves like a quiet current, invisible yet persistent, shaping human understanding in subtle and profound ways. Artifacts serve as both evidence and metaphor for this hidden inheritance. Tools, carvings, and objects that defy the conventional timelines of human capability suggest a sophistication that stretches far beyond what we expect. Precision metalwork, complex stone engineering, and symbolic objects found in disparate locations speak to an intellectual continuity that survives even in the absence of cities, written texts, or formal education. These artifacts are like letters sent across centuries, messages encoded in stone, metal, and clay, waiting for a mind capable of reading them. They are evidence not only of the ingenuity of early humans, but of the knowledge they may have inherited, refined, and carried forward into civilizations like Sumer. Mythology, too, carries the imprint of this inheritance. Stories of culture bringers, divine sages, and antediluvian teachers recur across cultures, often in remarkably similar forms. The Apkallu of Mesopotamia, the Thoth of Egypt, the Quetzalcoatl of Mesoamerica. These figures embody wisdom, law, astronomy, and craftsmanship. While modern scholars often dismiss these as purely symbolic, they may reflect the memory of real knowledge preserved through oral tradition. Myths, in this sense, act as a subtle form of pedagogy, transmitting insight across generations when written records are absent or incomplete. They are echoes of a civilization that exists more in principle than in physical form, guiding humanity from behind the veil of history. The transmission of knowledge may also have been aided by environmental and cultural continuity. Even as cities fell and civilizations vanished, human communities retained skills and understanding, sometimes codified in ritual, practice, or observation. Agricultural techniques, astronomical knowledge, and symbolic systems persisted quietly, adapted to new contexts, and eventually synthesized in the innovations of early urban centers. Knowledge, in this sense, is resilient. It flows like a hidden river beneath the visible surface of civilization, shaping human development in ways that are not immediately apparent, but become clear when patterns are traced carefully over time and space. Geography itself preserves the imprint of hidden inheritance. Sites separated by thousands of miles display remarkable similarities in structure, orientation, and symbolic representation. From the observatories of the Near East to the megalithic circles of Western Europe, from the pyramids of Egypt to the stone temples of South America, we observe a quiet resonance in human ingenuity. These similarities may be the result of convergent evolution, yet the repeated echoes of pattern, proportion, and alignment suggest more than coincidence. They hint at the possibility of a shared intellectual heritage, carried forward by a civilization whose material traces may have been largely erased, but whose influence endures in subtle, persistent ways. The psychological impact of contemplating such inheritance is profound. It forces us to reconsider our assumptions about human origins, innovation, and the nature of progress. We are accustomed to seeing civilization as a linear trajectory, emerging gradually from simple beginnings to complex achievements. Yet the evidence of hidden inheritance suggests a more layered, intricate story in which human advancement is shaped not only by ingenuity, but by the subtle, enduring influence of minds long vanished. The story becomes one of continuity, reflection, and quiet guidance, challenging us to see humanity not merely as inventors, but as stewards of a legacy older than ourselves. This perspective also reshapes our understanding of knowledge itself. If much of human civilization is built upon inherited wisdom, then discovery becomes less an isolated act of genius and more a continuation of a much longer conversation, a dialogue across centuries between those who came before and those who came after. Mathematics, astronomy, architecture, language, and ritual are all strands in this conversation, linking human thought in ways that transcend time and geography. Civilization is then not a series of isolated sparks, but a complex, luminous tapestry woven from the threads of countless generations. Humanity's hidden inheritance is, in essence, both humbling and inspiring. It reminds us that our achievements, while remarkable, are part of a continuum extending far beyond our lifetimes. It suggests that even the earliest civilizations we study, Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, may have stood on the shoulders of those whose names we will never know, whose cities and monuments were lost to floods, fires, or the slow erosion of time. Yet their wisdom persists, quietly guiding the arc of human understanding, shaping thought, culture, and innovation in ways that remain visible if we are attentive enough to see. In contemplating this inheritance, one is also drawn to the poetic dimension of human history. There is a beauty in recognizing that knowledge is not lost entirely, that it flows like a hidden current beneath the surface of events, whispering to those capable of listening. The stones, the symbols, the monuments, and the myths all act as vessels of memory, carrying forward the lessons, observations, and insights of civilizations that predate our own. They remind us that time is not merely chronological, but layered, rich with unseen influences that continue to shape us. Finally, reflecting on humanity's hidden inheritance encourages a broader perspective on our place in history. We are both inheritors and contributors, participants in a story that stretches far beyond our immediate perception. The knowledge we possess, the innovations we create, and the wisdom we preserve will in turn become the inheritance of future generations. In this way, the quiet currents of the past continue to shape the present and the future, a testament to the resilience, creativity, and enduring curiosity of the human mind. Beneath the surface of recorded history lies a tapestry of memory, wisdom, and influence, subtle yet profound. Civilization, as we know it, is not the beginning of human understanding, but a visible flowering of knowledge nurtured through countless generations. By tracing these hidden threads, we gain not only insight into the past, but also a sense of connection, wonder, and humility. A reminder that we are part of a long, unbroken chain of human thought, echoing through time like the faint light of stars that guide us quietly across the night sky. As we consider the story of humanity, the brilliance of early civilizations like Sumer shines brightly, yet beneath this light lies a quieter, hidden narrative. There may have been civilizations before them, wisdom keepers whose names, cities, and histories are lost, but whose knowledge quietly shaped the trajectory of human development. Traces remain in artifacts, myths, monuments, and subtle patterns, whispering across time that knowledge is rarely born in isolation. Sumerian achievements, from writing to astronomy, may not have arisen fully independently. They could be the flowering of insights passed down through generations, refined and adapted from older, invisible currents of understanding. Tools, symbols, and structures hint at a continuity that stretches far beyond recorded history, suggesting that human ingenuity is as much inherited as it is invented. Myths, legends, and ritual practices may have preserved fragments of this ancient knowledge, guiding societies long before written records existed. Contemplating this hidden inheritance invites both humility and wonder. It reminds us that civilization is a tapestry of visible achievement interwoven with invisible currents of wisdom. The knowledge of the past, preserved through objects, stories, and celestial observation, continues to influence us, just as we, in turn, will pass our understanding forward. Each discovery, each reflection, is part of a continuum linking past, present, and future. In the end, the story of humanity is not just a sequence of inventions or conquests, but a living dialogue, a quiet, enduring conversation between generations. By listening to these whispers from the past, we connect with the minds that came before us, honor the knowledge they preserved, and recognize our place in the ever-unfolding journey of human understanding.